next bit of watching us.
Yes.
Excellent.
Seems strange, but it's been fun.
It has been fun.
What I had to work with in terms of behaviour. So if I had Harry on the table, I'd be at a surface where I could see his feet easily. So that was part of my plan. Have a comfy surface where he wouldn't slip. So the mat on the table. And then after that, I just wanted to see what would he give me. And I decided
So I think it's an interesting comment there about just thinking about non-slip surfaces. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested because you come from a gymnastics background and coaching background, and how does that relate to you, and what do you think about that? Because I think it's so important with animals and any learner.
Yeah, I was a balance beam coach most, and a long time ago the balance beams were very slippery.
Yeah.
So you used to grind your feet in rosin so that they wouldn't slip, and then they put a non-slip coating on top of the balance beam, and kids would still put chalk on their feet. So I think, especially when you're unsure, being grounded in the literal sense of the word, so take out the air quotes, being grounded, can really help our sense of confidence and help us forget about the bottom half and get into our brains, right? So if we can forget about this for a second so I can listen or observe. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think so many times when from an animal perspective, we might be trying to give them food as a reinforcer, and we find that it's not very effective. But if we allow them to access safety, so can they be comfortable? Have they had a chance to just look around? So sometimes when I start a session, I let the learner walk in and they get to just walk around the room, sniff, check things out. I don't call them, I don't wave treats around. Soon as they finish, or as soon as they look in my direction, I'll toss a treat. And so there's a contingency. You can engage in this direction and treats will appear, or you can continue sniffing around. There's no pressure. And what I find is if the animals had a chance to check things out, then when they do come and engage, they're like, I can carry on engaging with you rather than going, but I need to check over there, I need to check over there. And I'm assuming it's the same for kids and people sometimes.
Yeah, well, and horses, right? When you go into a ring, you let them go in, you let them, I let them, not everybody does, sniff other poop piles. Who's been here? Are they gone? Am I safe?
Yeah.
But I have a question for you now. How long would you allow that to happen? Say they did it, they've gone to all four corners and they've pretty much, and now they're just not paying attention to you. Will you let that continue, or?
So, yes and no. So yes, in terms of I will try and let that just wait until they do start to engage. However, I know that isn't going to happen by magic, and so anytime they are looking in my direction, I'm starting to turn, I'm tossing that food on. I'm offering a potential reinforcer. If I'm not seeing them come and engage with me, that tells me I need to either make the rest of the environment less competing, or I need to make what I have to offer better.
Can we call that you being the most interesting thing in the room?
Yeah.
Whether it's because you have external reinforcers, or just because you're so charming and they want to be, which is a reinforcement.
Previous reinforcement history too.
Reinforcement history,
so like previous sessions, they come in, and what I would see is animals in the beginning, I might get 4 minutes of sniffing around and looking around. As the sessions go on, I would expect much shorter latency. So they walk in the room and straight away they're like, I'm ready. And
so they look around, they go, nothing dangerous.
Yeah.
You're a lot of fun.
Exactly. And the other way I think of it is sometimes with people is if I was to give you a magazine or a newspaper, or let's say a modern example would be a website. So we're looking at a website, I pull it up, you start to look at it. Before you've had a chance, I click on the next button, About Us.
Oh, that's such good.
And then I go to the next button, About Contact Us or Shop. And almost, it's so much information, it just goes, I didn't even get the first bit. Yeah. And I think we do that with humans, we do that with non-humans. So we walk out the door with our dogs, we start walking, and their sense of smells are so powerful. It's almost like you're putting a newspaper in front of them, or a magazine or an article, and before they've had a chance to even look, you're turning the pages constantly. And so I think in the beginning sometimes you're slowing down and they go, oh, okay, next page please, next page. And then that way we teach them to become speed readers, and they almost speed read the environment and they're ready to go, okay, I'm ready to listen. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, very good.
the behavior of foot coming up on my hand, and just so I can manipulate it, he's comfortable with foot coming on my hand, me touching it, moving it around before I start doing any kind of clipping.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you take that back anymore, we need to see, is he comfortable just shifting his weight for that long, right?
Yeah, exactly.
With Penny, my dog you've been working with, we were doing some of those things, and all of a sudden we found weaknesses that turned out to be an injury that was on its way.
Exactly.
So not just part of the trick, but is the animal ready for this? And it's the same thing with humans sometimes.
So there's 2 points there. The first one being teaching. You mentioned about the shift of balance, and again, is that from a gymnastics thought process that you think about it, or is that what made you say those comments?
That's often the first skill we teach, especially in the balance beam, when if you pick up something, if it shifts your weight off 4 inches, you fall. And falls hurt on balance beam. So being able to, being comfortable with, and the thing is it can change, right? So earlier in the day, may have been fine with it.
Yeah.
But now something has changed. There's a strain or a sprain or just something's off. And your balance will change due to fatigue as well, right? So if they've been running and they're fatigued, it's not going to be the same thing as it was an hour ago when they weren't fatigued.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that I think we should constantly check in on.
Yeah.
Are we all healthy?
I did the point of even the fatigue setting in. So in the beginning of a session, you might be, if you're warmed up and you're ready to go, you might be able to offer so much behavior, a certain criteria, a certain level of that behavior. But as the session goes on, that may be too much to expect that same level of performance, and so that's where maybe it might be important to move to a different exercise or move to something else, or until you've built up the stamina or that muscle memory or the muscle strength. To be conscious of that.
Absolutely. And one of the things as a coach or a teacher, you look at, you have this goal over here, and we forget to check in, and maybe I would start looking at a skill starting to fall. I'm like, wait, you did it last time. Are you not paying attention this time? Are you not trying as hard?
Yeah.
And what they are fatigued, and maybe not even fatigued enough that they know it yet. But there are microscopic fatigues happening that will change the balance.
And I think that's a really interesting point, is how much of our body are we really aware of? And I think often we're not trained to be aware of our bodies in that nuanced way. And how can our learners communicate or tell us that I am fatigued? And often when they do, we're not on the same page, and so we interpret those signs as loss of interest or distraction or playing up, or you need to listen and focus more, and then that almost makes it worse. And the next,
do you not want this?
Exactly. And so I think that's such an interesting point. And for me, I find this really fascinating, because I truly believe in training. These are the areas that we're skipping over at the moment. I think training has become so popular. People want to do different types of training with their animals, even though it's focused on positive reinforcement. I don't necessarily think it's ethical, because if you're focused on achieving tasks and goals, but you're not aware of the whole animal in terms of the muscle strength, you're not aware of, are they fatigued? Sometimes we push them further than they maybe need to go, because we're saying we're using positive reinforcement. And I think these foundation areas are being skipped, and then later on, almost the foundations aren't solid, so you start having problems that further up.
Yeah. I think those who aren't really in depth in behavior analysis have to be very careful of saying I use positive reinforcement, and being fooled by that nomenclature, if that's the right word. You think you're doing something right. When I first learned about it, I would say, but I was being nice.
Yes.
And nice didn't had very little to do with it.
Yeah.
Is it improving the behavior? Is it strengthening the behavior in the future? So we just need to be careful about when people first get into this with confusing being nice with positive reinforcement.
Exactly.
Right? Because that was something I said when I got into this. It was through a horse.
Yeah.
Right? And I said I couldn't force him to do it. I couldn't yell at him to do it. I couldn't push him around. And most interestingly to me, I couldn't be nice. I'd be like, please, I'm being nice in a human way, and that wasn't even enough. And that's when I had to go that step further and find out what would make it worth it for him, which is how I always look at it. I'll do it if it's worth it.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, so then that's really big, because positive sounds like you have to be positive and upbeat.
Yeah.
But when we talk about reinforcement, Penny's having a conversation as well, joining in on the conversation. So when we're talking about positive reinforcement, it's important to remember the positive is simply meaning adding something, and the reinforcement is meaning to strengthen. I always think of it as, if you reinforce a building, what happens? You make it stronger. So when you think about behaviour, you're making it stronger by adding something.
Yeah.
And so when you give your dog a treat, if that makes the behaviour stronger, then that was a reinforcer. And if you say, I want to strengthen my house, I'm going to get a little bit of cement and put it on the bottom, and you go, no, but why is the house falling down? I strengthened it, I reinforced it. But you didn't, because the evidence is saying the house is still falling down. So for that house, for that type of brick or wall, whatever it is, that's not reinforcing. That's not how you reinforce. And so we have to be aware is every house, every structure is going to be different. And so with that behaviour, what is it that we need to be reinforcing?
Yeah. Because some of us who were, not that we weren't nice, so we were very focused, so we were very goal focused. And then when we tried being nice and we didn't get a big jump in the skill acquisition or performance level, then we're like, I was nice. Now I'm not going to be nice anymore. And we can very quickly be turned away from looking further into the science and what that really means, as opposed to something on the outside that means, when you give me something, I'll do something. It gets all messed up, right? The terminology, if you're not willing to study it, it gets messed up. So I love the idea of looking at the house. That makes sense without going into a lot of the science for people who were just introducing it to.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I think that, like you say, it's such an important thing, because we all say, like we hear often, I tried it, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that almost is a reflection often, if we're willing to take a step back and go, hold on a second, this science has a lot of data behind it, there's a lot of evidence to show it does work, but maybe I need to look at the principles differently. I need to actually see if my understanding is incorrect, or if I need to grow my understanding, or what level do I have an understanding of this. So if it hasn't worked for you, then maybe rather than going, well, it doesn't work, full stop, thinking, actually, how can I study this, or how can I look at it slightly differently?
Yeah, my skill level is not working.
Exactly.
My teacher skill level isn't working,
And then the other point in the video I wanted to mention before we go back was, we talked about Penny, and we talked about how during the training sessions we noticed there were slight different behaviours than what we were expecting, and that turned out to be a physical condition for her.
That was very small and just erupting.
Yeah. And you, so I think it may be worthwhile just using that as an example, because people listening might go, oh, I didn't think about that, or that my dog might be experiencing something similar. And so with Penny, there are a number of interesting things with her. So one of the things was, in training sessions, there was a lot of mixed responding. So a lot of times she'll be upbeat and excited, her tail will be there, but then there'll be other times where she'll be very, almost, if you want to label it, like miserable or sad or avoidant. I don't want to be here. Her head will be turning away. She'll be slow to respond. And
definitely less injury than the training before.
Yes.
There was a change,
A massive change. And then some of the other things that you mentioned. So if I'm working with a learner and I see something change overnight that wasn't there previously, that's a big red flag for me to go, why is it different today? And if I can't see anything, for me, in the environment, and not just for me, in terms of the definition of an environment is both internal and external to the behaviour we're talking about. So the environment could be inside the learner as well. Yeah. And so I start with, what can I see, smell, hear, sense on the outside? I can't. What can I see, smell, sense, or touch, or look at from an inner perspective? So I can't see anything on the outside, but I can see a limp, or I can see a slight hesitation in the way the dog's getting up, or the learner's getting up, or the way the human's sitting down in the chair. They do like a sigh as they sit down, and all of those things might be clues. And that could say there could be something going on internally, some pain or discomfort or chemical changes or hormonal changes that are influencing what's going on here. There are a couple of other things that you mentioned to me before as well. So with Penny and her floors, how long has she been? Because she tries to avoid slippery floors or like wooden floors, laminate floors. How long has she done that for?
We always had wood floors before we moved to this new house. Never really had a problem with that. And didn't seem to have a huge problem with it until weeks ago.
Okay.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, well, actually, I think what we found was some weird noise sensitivity. I said, wow, that noise didn't used to bother her. Although loud noises did. Yeah. she was seemed to be more sensitive. She would react a little stronger to noises. And then when the cat would surprise her, so the cat would jump up on it, she would do that scramble, the feet not getting purchase on the floor. And that was kind of unusual. She never really lost purchase before. Okay. And that's when I think you were like, wait, sound sensitivity, scrambling on the floor. I just said she's more sound sensitive and she's scrambling on the floor. Interesting.
And it is interesting because often you go, okay, the cat jumped on the dog went to run away, they slipped on the floor. Yeah. So that really could be a possible explanation of why I'm avoiding floors. Yeah. And that could be an explanation of why when I see sudden movement happens or noise happens, I spook a little bit. But an alternate explanation could also be if I'm feeling discomfort or pain and the floors are slippery slightly, and I can't keep my grip on there. Or if a sound is happening, it could be any sound, and that causes me to tense my muscles or to suddenly look around, that's going to cause internal pain if I have to constantly going. And if I've got pain and I'm on the tube or I'm walking outside and people are close to me, I'm with my friends, I'm much more protective of my body space. And so sometimes dogs will growl a little bit more, or humans might be a bit more shouty or a bit more defensive, or animals just might be a little bit more back offish or stay slightly further away because they're protecting themselves. And there's some interesting research from the University of Lincoln, I think Bristol have published some stuff as well, looking at correlations between noise sensitivity and pain. And so all of those factors we thought were so interesting, and when we watched Penny move we thought, her back legs don't look perfectly well placed, they look a bit weak. So then we went to the vets and it turns out she does have weakness in her rear end, and there's a treatment plan that she's undergoing and to help with that, changing that. But I thought that was so interesting to talk about that, because so often we could have labelled the dog as stubborn or just anxious, or they're just being a little bit difficult today.
Well, that's what I did. I said, I wonder why she's being so much more anxious. I don't even know if I used that word, but she was being more.
Yes.
And in a day or two, you went, you said about the noise sensitivity and the scrambling on the floor, that could be pain. And I went, well, I didn't say no, but my first instinct was, really? Mm-hmm. Because it just seems like she's being more that way. Yeah. So, and then another week or so went by, and we started to see that it really was something. So it was a really early eye on your part, really early. Thank God.
And it helped her. And I think the other fascinating things I find that I think are really worth discussing or mentioning are things like Penny still carried on running. Like she'll still have her jolly zoomies. She would still be running around, bouncing. She would jump into the car, jump on the sofa. So a lot of times it just doesn't make sense if we look at it from a human perspective. Sometimes think, but the dog is fine because they jump on the couch or they jump into the car. And if we look at a human, or if we look at ourselves, sometimes I can go out and I can be jolly, I can smile and laugh, and I'm with my friends, I've taken some medicine, or I've slept, or I've woken up, and I go out, and if I spent a couple of hours with them, they go, oh, he's fine, I saw him yesterday, we were playing a game together. But then when I get home and I'm sleeping, I probably can't sleep very well, and they maybe don't see that. So sometimes pain is so specific to individuals and how it presents with different people. There's so many people who live with different types of pain, and we would never know unless they told us. And I think it's so important to remember that with our animals as well. Just because they are times where they can be active and jump doesn't mean they're not suffering from something as well.
Yeah, and to pay attention, because I think had we let it go to the point where I saw it, and she didn't have the zoomies and she couldn't jump on the car, that would have been a blown ligament, right? That would have been totally different plan than we have now. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
So, and then I think it's just something to be aware of, something to, if anyone thinks their dog might have, or even their child, if you wake up and they might have a toothache, or it might be their teeth are coming through or something, if there's behaviour that is different, rather than labelling it as the first thing we do, going, he's just been naughty today, he's just been difficult, stop and go, hold on a second, this isn't normal.
Right.
Why is it different today? And it may not be obvious to us. It may not be, well, everything looks the same. But it could be also, you might ask, Theresa, are you okay? And you might say, oh yeah, I'm fine, because you don't necessarily, there's times where I felt things and I don't understand what I'm feeling. So if you were to ask me, how are you? I would have said, I'm fine. But actually, I'm not fine.
Later on, the headache got really bad and you're like, oh, I had a headache.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's something, for me, just to have that part of it is kindness, but part of it is just being objective and open to what is actually happening and stepping out of our biases that we don't always realize that we have.
Yeah, that's really important. And to segue back into this, it might be one of the best reasons to do short training, even if you don't train, but to have a regular short training session, a minute a day, like you're helping me do a training session with giving her medicine.
Yeah.
So that as we're training, I can see, is her behavior different than it was yesterday?
Yeah.
Is she sitting the same way when we started? I do this with my horses. I have to go in and you make sure that you've done some brushing. Mm-hmm. Is it really to make sure their coat is shiny? Not so much, but as you're brushing, you can feel for ripples if they're touching, or maybe there's a puncture in the skin that you couldn't see. So I think that really sets up for a reason to do even if they're micro sessions, even if they're 1 minute sessions every day, just to get a check in. Because again, it could have been, we hope it's good, but it could have been more catastrophic had we waited. So
exactly.
It's a good reason to do cats on the table, silly trainings, just to see how they're feeling. Is he lifting paws up equally? Yeah.
And can we add in some kind of training? You're watching this and you finish watching, can you go, oh, I already do something every day with my dog or my cat or my bird or even my child, just sitting down with them, talking with them, and just spend a few minutes, because that helps me go, are they in pain?
Baselines.
Exactly, collect baselines and be able to compare them. So that might be something that people can take away from this episode and kind of go and do. Yeah. And see how that works for you.
Yeah. And it's a really good reason to have a behaviorist or a trainer with you, because they see things that you might not see.
But that's the same for for me as well. Even though I'm a behaviourist, I might see something with my dog. If I'm with my friends, I'll often ask them, how do you see he's walking? How do you see this? What do you see there? It's not that I see anything necessarily. I just want to make sure that I can be aware of my biases, because there's so many times where we drive along every day. We drive along the road every day. We might see 50 Teslas and we might not even notice them. But I buy a Tesla. I haven't got a Tesla.
So where do you see 50 Teslas?
That's a bad example. But okay, let's just say we see 50 red, I don't know, some kind of cars. And I buy a red, some kind of car. Then suddenly I'm driving and I see it everywhere. Or I sign up to membership with a certain store, and I've never even noticed those stores I drive by. Now because I've got a membership card and I get points, I go, there's another store, there's another store, there's another store. Yeah. And they were always there. Yeah. And so if that's happening with behaviour too, there's so many things that we've got these lenses that we either see in a certain way or we don't see certain things. It's so important to be open to asking other people. Network. And listen. Exactly. And network. And listen. And if you don't agree, it's really important to go, oh no, but my opinion is, I didn't ask you for an opinion just so I could say
Penny's opinion.
Just so I could say, oh no, I disagree, because that could maybe the next time I ask you for your opinion, you're like, well, never listens to it anyway. So really, if we do ask someone's opinion and it's really valuable, listen to it. And even if you don't agree, there's no need to say to them, I disagree. Just you take that information, you can choose to use it or not use it. But the next time that person can still give you their opinion, and we haven't kind of punished them giving that opinion again. I think it's so important to get.
And it could be really important for you or your animal.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we all have lenses, right? We all have filters, and they're important to have, because otherwise we'd be overwhelmed. So we put those on for our own safety and our own sanity. But those filters do filter out. Yeah. Right? So when I bring somebody else in, not only are they bringing in their own education and their own baselines and their own information, but maybe their filters are different and they see something that I didn't see. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Well, we'll see you guys on the next episode. I think that was a really valuable chat. And
yeah. Baseline training. Do micro trainings every day.
See you guys later.
Bye.